We're going to begin this video by talking about the brief history of English grammar.
Up until the late 14th century, English was not a prestigious language in England. Schools, universities, and the church conducted their affairs in Latin. Most other official business was conducted in Anglo-French. No grammar of English existed because the language simply was not viewed as important. The history of grammars in English is similar to dictionaries, though the fact that they were being created at all signaled the growing status of English. The first grammar of English was published in 1580 by William Bullochar. Up until very recently, grammars of English were dry and prescriptive, even more so than dictionaries. Grammars, for the most part, have deliberately attempted to regulate English. These early prescriptive grammars assumed standard English, and no one thought to write one that accounted for all the social varieties of English. The scholars who wrote these grammars were educated in literary Latin, which was viewed as the most pure language. However, Latin also had dialects. Many different languages began as dialects of Vulgar Latin. In the 18th century, so many new, literate people populated educated professions that nearly 1 million grammars were sold across the English-speaking world.
Now we will talk about prescriptive versus descriptive tendency in grammars of English.
Robert Lowth, known as one of English's arch prescriptivists, wrote, "The principal design of a grammar of any language is to teach us to express ourselves with propriety in that language, and to enable us to judge of every phrase and form of construction whether it's right or not. The plain way of doing this is to lay down rules and to illustrate them by examples. But besides showing what is right, the matter may be further explained by pointing out what is wrong." The emphasis on rules and what is wrong has plagued students and their teachers ever since. Unlike Lowth, George Campbell's view on grammar was significantly different. Campbell argued that the study of grammar should be descriptive.
Campbell believed that correctness was the province of rhetoric. While grammar described use, rhetoric would determine which usage was better than the rest.
He drew the line between grammar and style. In prescriptive grammar, one essentially starts with the rule system. The rules are given, and the output of the rules is a set of correct sentences or proper usage of English. Descriptive grammar is the opposite of prescriptive tendencies. Instead of starting with the rules, descriptive tendencies start with the actual sentence and build the rule system based on that sentence. We, as future teachers, should provide a context for standard English and teach descriptive grammar also. Finally, after 250 years, once descriptivism became the norm among linguistics, Campbell's idea grammar was finally achieved by the Cambridge Grammar of the English language.
Now we are going to discuss some of the modern approaches to English usage.
Henry Watson Fowler wrote the dictionary Modern English Usage. This book was used for a guide in the 20th century so people could learn English.
The following video is an excerpt by David Crystal, who is the editor of the new edition of Fowler's Dictionary of Modern English Usage.
And I've just edited a new edition of Fowler's Dictionary of Modern English Usage, 1926, first edition. And Fowler, everybody knows the name Fowler. There are few people in the 20th century who have written on language whose names has actually got into the dictionary. We talk about, I've got my Fowler downstairs. I'm looking it up in Fowler. Nobody ever says, I'm looking it up in the dictionary of modern. We don't talk like that. And people talk about Fowlerian and Fowleresque, and all sorts of other adjectives have come into the language. Nobody else in the 20th century has produced so many nouns and so many adjectives as Henry Watson Fowler did. He's had more influence, I think, on 20th century attitudes to language than anybody else. He's had a few updatings and a few revisions. This is the thing. There have been new editions of Fowler since 1926. But you know, what happens with these new editions is that the new editor interposes himself between now and then. You don't see Fowler so clearly. You see the new editor. And as a result, a lot of people have felt that the original ideas and personality and humor and scholarship and industry of Fowler has somehow been lost because of these revisions. Now, what's happening with this new edition is that you don't see me, you don't see David Crystal in there in front of Fowler. You see Fowler at the front, letting the man talk as he's supposed to be, with me behind the scene. He wrote at a time when language was at a turning point. The 19th century was a century of prescriptivism, people laying down rules about how we ought to speak and how we ought to write. The 20th century was beginning to be a century of descriptivism, with people saying, well, hang on a minute, let's have a look at how the majority of people actually do speak and write. So there was this tension in Fowler. And one of the things I had to do, obviously, was write a new introduction to the book, to try and evaluate Fowler from the point of view of 100 years on. Is he the prescriptivist that everybody thinks he is? Is he the arch-prescriptivist, the arch-rule imposer on everyone? Or isn't he? Well, read the book and you'll find out. But just to give you a hint of my conclusion, yes, I think he is right in the middle of the two traditions. On the one hand, he's anti-prescriptive. If you think Fowler is in favour of split infinitives or ending sentences with prepositions or beginning sentences with and but, if you hate those things and you think Fowler's on my side, you'd be wrong. Fowler hated those things. He thought they were stupid. Nobody should be worried about splitting infinitives, he said. Nobody should be worried about ending sentences with prepositions, he said. Nobody should be worried about starting a sentence with but. So he was against some of the crazier rules of traditional prescriptivism.
Fowler's success led to other usage books, including one written by Wilson Follett.
Wilson Follett wrote the book Modern American Usage. His book focused on the correct ways to construct sentences when writing.
Overall, English grammar, usage, and style continues to be debated about, and has been debated about for many years. Books have been written to help people understand the English language, but at the same time, people continue to debate the rules that have been set forth.